What's up, everybody? College Sports Network ranks the 100 returning players in college football. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? Locked On SEC, Locked On Gamecocks crossover starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC, Locked On Gamecocks crossover edition here. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every day. I'm Chris Gordy, host of Locked On SEC. He is Chris Marler, host of Locked On Gamecocks, looking a lot like Fidel Castro with his big beard there and his hat. Welcome in. How are you?
I almost broke our no cussing rule there, so that's good. I'm good. I am good. Is that how he sounds? I don't know. I can't do it. Is that bad to do a Cuban accent? Am I going to get canceled? Also, I want to treat this just like the episode of The Office where Michael and Rob Riggle are on the party boat, the booze cruise.
Yeah, booze cruise.
Yeah, so every time you start saying something, I'm just going to interrupt like a half a second later going, I'm also your party captain.
Well, look, we got a lot to get to. I do want to get to this list of 100 returning players of college football because there are a number of Gamecocks on that list, and so I think it's a good topic to kind of cross over for both our audiences. But I did want to touch on, Marler, just the state of where we are right now. We're starting to get some spring dates and dates for a lot of different teams and when they're going to be practicing and hitting the practice fields, and a lot are doing it this weekend, if not this week, then next week. But what's interesting is we're getting some dates for some spring games, but man, we are getting a lot of schools announcing no spring games, and just seems like it's becoming the trend here. Texas started it with Steve Sarkisian going, oh man, we've played so many games these last 2 years. We're just so tired. And somebody was like, wait, didn't you lose half your roster to the draft? Yeah. But no, we're just so tired. We can't do another a spring game. Are you kidding me? And then Eli Drinkwitz doubles up and goes, look, man, we're doing renovations at our stadium. In fact, we're not doing a spring game this year. We're not doing a spring game next year. The next 2 years we can't. And it's like, okay, we're making a lot of excuses here, but the bigger picture here is, Marler, it feels like a lot of these coaches are the Matt Rule type. Mm-hmm. They're a little paranoid and they're worried about those guys deep on their roster entering the spring portal.
So, and I fully get it. I honestly, I feel like I'm in the minority here. I enjoy the Matt Rule rules of the situation where it feels like he was being transparent. Like the other ones kind of feel like an excuse. And listen, like it's always okay just for the coach to be like, hey, we're not going to do this. Here's why. Because we can all finally get to this point where I think a lot of fans can finally say, yeah, like it even in the past, it was like, we don't want to hear it from Saban. We don't want to hear this person complaining about it, or we don't want to hear this person saying that like there's all these issues with college football when they have been like the ones that have benefited the most from kind of the Wild Wild West version of the pre-rules era. I feel like that we're in right now. I feel like now everyone can kind of see all the issues. So if you say it's because of you don't want to deal with the issues that are currently at hand, I feel like we all get it. It is weird to lie about it. I was telling you this, I think, off air. Like last year, you had five Power 4 programs that decided not to play a spring game. And it was places like Northwestern, Minnesota, Vanderbilt was one of them. And I forgot the other two. And Northwestern was one that's having an actual full-on stadium renovation.
And Vandy, too. Vandy was going through the renovation.
Well, that's going to be ongoing. That's going to be like an interstate in the Southeast. Like that's like they've been working on the roads on I-20 since I was like 4 years old. That Vandy Stadium will be no different, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are still roads in Atlanta that started in 1983 construction, and they still haven't finished.
It's unbelievable. Shout out to the potholes on Ponce de Leon. So, no, I think that the issue is you're starting to see it like there was 5 total last year, and now you look at like Southern Cal's doing it. And in a year where Southern Cal probably could use as much positive publicity as they could get, Nebraska. And then the other part of it too that's kind of surprising is, I mean, Nebraska's a program where like they sold it out a couple years ago, like 84,000 people. They had over 60,000 last year, it was the 4th most in the country. And to see those schools kind of say, no, we're not going to do that. Alabama's going to play a modified game. Ole Miss already plays a modified game. It's interesting to see that this is the trend they're moving in. And I really don't know if it makes a huge difference. Like I don't know if that's going to put a dent in all of the people leaving and that issue with the people in the portal.
Well, I do. Let me ask you this. If they canceled the spring portal, like you can't cancel this year because you already said you're going to have it. But if they come out in a few weeks and say, we're canceling the spring portal moving forward, do you think we get back to regular spring games next year?
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, and I think that they should just cancel the portal this year. Just treat it like Tony, what's his name, from Heavyweights, be like, portal's canceled due to lack of hustle, and then just move on from it. Like I do think it worries me if they do get rid of it, if they're going to also then even out on the back end of that, where the calendar kind of needs a little bit more adjusting to where it's more balanced year round. But I would be all for that.
How do you adjust it when Vanderbilt finishes their season the last weekend of November and Ohio State's season didn't end until the third week of January? Like, how do you adjust that? It's almost a 2-month difference.
It was over 50 days. It was over 50 days from when the regular season ended versus when the national championship was. I think the one thing that's very surprising to me too is like the calendar obviously is messed up as is, right? Like I don't know how you fix that. But the one thing that, and Kirby Smart talked about this at least 2 years ago, and I remember saying then, it's like, this is going to fall on deaf ears because people don't want to hear rich people or successful people give their opinions on legitimate problems. And that sounds maybe weird, but it's one of the reasons why Saban got a ton of pushback about it early. It's one reason why Kirby Smart, when he was saying kind of the same stuff, it's like, it's not like Lane where it's like, or Dabo where it's like, oh, it's just unlikable people to some. It's because you don't want to hear someone that's like kind of at the top or at their most successful point tell you like, oh, there's still all these problems. But Kirby even said a couple years ago, it's like, like we leave spring and we still have no idea what our team is going to look like going into the fall. Because then you have like the dead period when you have like, you're not allowed to be coaching in the summer with 7-on-7 stuff. And then you show back up to fall camp at the end of July, early August. And then you got to figure out what your actual roster is. It's just, it's not done well as of right now.
Yeah. And it like you mentioned, Kalen DeBoer coming out this past week saying, yeah, look, we're going to have a spring game, but it ain't going to be your traditional, what you're used to. It's going to be very modified. I do like, Shane Beamer doubled down. South Carolina said, not only are we playing a spring game, we're doing it on a Friday night. We're going to do Friday night lights in the stadium. We're going to do this as a big time event. And look, I'm curious to see, I'm sure the Gamecock faithful will show up and show out for that. Like, let's see the difference between Texas, who treats it like OTAs that says we're just going to do calisthenics and stuff, versus South Carolina that's going to play an actual spring game, and let's see how it goes. But I do think fans enjoy that. Like, you can't tell me the folks in Austin wouldn't. I mean, they're going gaga over Arch Manning. They'd love to see him in a spring game.
Gordy, without getting too preachy about it, I don't think it's too much to say this, and I've said it on our own show when I talked about it, like the potential of canceling games or spring games in the future. But like, I mean, you grew up in the South. I grew up in the South. I grew up in a house that didn't have a ton of money. And when we would go to our favorite team's games, it was like, I'll give you the Braves example. Oh, the Expos are in town. Cool. Let's go get outfield seats for $10. Like, a lot of times, like in people that can't afford to go to these games where it's like, you got to pay for, especially with a family, go to like, the tickets cost this. Make sure you use the Game Time app on the tickets. The tickets cost this. Then you have stuff that's like parking and then food while you're there. It all adds up so much. A lot of times a spring game is one of the few days that some people have where they can like go see their favorite school or their alma mater or their favorite team with their family and have it not break the bank. And to get rid of it, like it does feel very out of touch with like Texas versus other schools doing it, because I feel like at Mississippi State, that's something that you're going to want people to show up to. At Texas, it's just like, it's a different mindset of what people are privy to getting from you.
And just some dates real quick. I've seen early Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma. All these schools are going to do the 12th. Tennessee's in that mix, Texas A&M, and then a few on the 19th. I think I saw Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State. They're all doing the night. So somewhere between April 12th and April 19th, you're going to get a lot of these spring games. It's just the question is, what are they going to look like? And it sounds like there'll be a modified version. All right, let's talk about those players that are going to be on those practice fields. some of the best players in college football. We got a ranking list that has come out, and we'll debate. Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? We'll run through that list of top 100 players coming up next. You're on a crossover edition, Locked On Gamecocks, Locked On SEC. But first, want to remind you guys about our friends over at Fabric. And look, life moves fast, especially when you have a family. And one day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they are off to college. That's why securing your future or securing their future is so important. And Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, you want to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric is going to give you that peace of mind. They also offer free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Go join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Fabric by Gerber Life. You check them out today. Meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege is the place to find them. As we dive back into it with Chris Marler, host of Locked On Gamecocks. And Marler, I came across this list on social media. In fact, a lot of our guys in the topics of our SEC chat with a lot of our other Locked On SEC hosts, we were throwing it out there. And so I figured we kind of start from behind and kind of work our way up. It's not a ton of SEC guys in here, probably about 40%. I was surprised how many non-SEC guys they had on this. But let's kind of run through these, and we'll decide, whether we agree or not. And by the way, Hayes Fawcett, one of the big guys out there who retweeted this. And again, this is according to College Sports Network. Top 100 returning players in college football for this upcoming season. And in the 100 through 91 ranking, we've got one guy on this list from the SEC. It is Jake Slaughter, the center from Florida, at number 99. Don't have a big problem with that. He's, I think there were some people who said they were surprised he decided to come back to Florida, but big time anchor of that O-line. And look, continuity with DJ Lagway, right? Your center, you have him back, should help Florida there at number 99.
Yeah, it's this graphic rules. It looks so good. My biggest surprise is probably outside of the SEC, and it's Sam Levitt, because that's a guy that a lot of other publications have very, very high. A lot of times I thought was way too high. 100 feels very low. Jake Slaughter, the continuity there, because you have a lot of returning talent coming from that offense, especially with DJ Lagway. It'll be interesting because, he's going to be on this list. I'm sure he's going to be very high on this list, but it's odd to see how much pub this kid's getting based off of. And I think he's going to be great. But 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions as a starter for a lot of the season. It's surprising to an extent. But I think that it's good to see the continuity there.
So those were the 90s. Let's jump into the 80s. And a couple of SEC guys coming in here. You got your guy, Nick Harbor, wide receiver at South Carolina, coming in at number 8. Number 86, you got Ole Miss linebacker Suntaran Perkins. And number 84 on here, Mizzou left guard Caden Green. Of all these guys, look, Perkins he's had some really nice games already in an Ole Miss uniform. The other guy on this list, Luke Hasz, who it's funny. It's a picture of him in an Arkansas jersey, but he's now an Ole Miss tight end at number 83. So a couple of big name guys here, but man, Nick Harbor is I feel like he's only scratched the surface on what this kid can become. A former 5-star that, if there was going to be a breakout season, this could potentially be it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you feel like he's only scratched the surface because he has. And I think the biggest thing for Nick Harbor is, now I wish he wasn't on this list at all. I would love to see him fly under the radar even more, but we've seen the glimpses of it. And I have talked a lot about this kid, because I'm just physically there's no comp, right? He's so incredibly gifted, and there's no one else that's that size that runs that well, all that kind of stuff. The most impressive thing about Nick Harbor, in my opinion, is that he is a selfless enough player and teammate that at a kid that was trying to compete to get to the Olympics in the summer, he came back for the fall and trying to figure out his game and trying to figure out this position, because it's not always even been his position. That's a kid that you got able to buy into blocking. I mean, he was out on the edge a lot and involved in those things a lot. You brought up the scratching the surface thing too. The thing that's biggest for him and his development is he's not going to have track this spring, which was his decision, which I feel like I'm sure that the staff, Mike Shula and Beamer, were very excited about that decision. But him being able to come in and like have an extra 15 practices, have an entire offseason to kind of learn and not have something else occupying any other part of his attention or time is huge. And I think I'm just very excited to see him. The other thing I'll say too on that list, I know Caden Green, Luke Hasz, and the other one, Suntaran Perkins was third in the conference last year in sacks. He had double-digit sacks, and for him to be at that low is shocking.
Four of them in the Oklahoma game alone. I mean, he was a wrecking ball. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like going through these rankings, that's the first one I'm kind of like 86 seems really low for that guy.
And a former 5-star. Like it's not like he's like flown under the radar and blossomed when he got there. He's always been that dude. And it's just kind of surprising.
All right, so those are your 80s. Nick Harbor, 88. Suntaran Perkins at 86. Caden Green at 84. Luke Hasz at 83. Let's jump into the 70s here. And coming in here, they have got Nico Iamaleava at 76. That one feels a little bit, I mean, look, he's got a lot to improve on, but 76, there's 75 better returning players in college football than Nico Iamaleava. And then the other one, they got Eli Stowers at 71. Look, I like Eli Stowers. He was a big-time weapon for Vanderbilt. But you're telling me he's a better returning player than Nico? Like, those two I kind of have a little bit of an issue with.
I am in the opposite boat here. I have a bigger issue with Stowers not being higher. Stowers, I think, is the best tight end in the country. He's awesome. Right? He's incredible. He was big all last year. Now I'm looking at the numbers right here just to back me up here. He finished second in the conference in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for a tight end behind Gunnar Helm. He also played 3 less games. But Stowers was a go-to guy on that offense for Vandy and Diego Pavia. But I'm kind of with you on the Nico thing. Listen, from 71 to 76, there's 4 names on there that I'm like, that feels low. The kid from Miami, former 5-star that went down there. Evan Stewart at 73 is shocking. But Nico, and maybe it's just where they are ranked and where they deserve to be ranked coming into the season. I could see that argument for Nico. But if it's projected, I just would be shocked for Nico not to put it all together in year 3.
Yeah. And Stowers, by the way, 3 100-yard games last year. 5 touchdowns. Can he improve on that? Sure. And I think he will with him and Pavia back for another season. But, yeah, man, I mean, it felt like that Alabama game. I mean, what was it? 6 catches, 113 yards. Bama had no
I think he had 187 third down conversions in that game alone.
It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the 60s here. And coming in at number 68, a new addition coming over from USC.
Yeah.
Wide receiver Zachariah Branch going to the Georgia Bulldogs. And then the other 2 SEC guys here, Caden Proctor, the Alabama left tackle at 62, and Cam Coleman, the Auburn freshman wide receiver at 61. I don't know. Like, I was overhyping, or I was hyping up Cam Coleman all offseason.
Yeah.
And he lived up to the hype, in my opinion. Like, as a freshman, I wish they would have gotten the ball more. But just kind of general, I would have Cam Coleman a little bit higher here. Caden Proctor, I think, is pretty fair. I think if he plays a great year, he'll end up as one of the best left tackles in all college football.
Right.
And Branch, I'm kind of in wait and see. Like, all those USC guys, it's like, dude, you were playing well at USC, but like there were no expectations there. Like you weren't a great team. At Georgia, he's definitely going to be on the spotlight a little bit, but just a thought on those 3 guys.
I like Branch. I like what he can do in different phases of the game too, like being such a dangerous threat in the return game. And that's a kid his freshman year. You got to see him a couple times late in the season, especially in that I think it's like the Utah game, and then they played somebody else before UCLA where he had that season he had a punt return for a touchdown, a kickoff return for a touchdown. An undeniably elite athlete, former 5-star guy. I think he'll be good. I'm just looking forward to who is going to step up for Georgia because of how bad they were with the drops. Like, I mean, listen, man, they had over 30 something drops last year for Carson Beck, and Beck caught a lot of flack, which ironically enough was more than a lot of his receivers ever caught. So,
it was too funny watching the Senior Bowl week and Arian Smith's catching everything. Like, come on, man.
I love Arian Smith. I think he's going to have a great week at the Combine this week as we're recording this. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be frustrating. It's got to be frustrating. So the other one, Caden Proctor, it'll be interesting to see what that kid looks like. I think the biggest thing for Caden Proctor going into this year, because this is supposed to be his draft eligible year, right? Struggled a lot as a freshman. And what that kid could have benefited from more than anything was having a spring practice. But instead he transferred, went to Iowa, sat there, and then worked out, I think, but then he decided he was coming back to Bama. So he came back to Bama, missed all the spring practice. And that is a kid that really could have benefited from having a lot of reps in that spring practice going into year two. He was night and day different from year one to year two. I think he'll only get better. Go back real quick because Cam Coleman. The Cam Coleman thing is interesting to me for a number of reasons. I said this earlier, Gordy, going into last year. There's not a position unit in the country that was going to be more improved in the country than Auburn's receiving core last year from 2024 versus what it looked like in 2023. And they didn't really overwhelm us or anything like that throughout the year. I wouldn't say they underwhelmed necessarily because Keandre Lambert-Smith was great. But Cam Coleman is one of those players, too, where it's like, did he have a good year or did he have a good end to the year? And I think the answer is probably somewhere where like two things to be true at the same time, because I fully expect him to live up to the same type of production he had versus his last three games. That's a kid that had 37 receptions and like right under 600 yards in the season. He had 22 of those catches out of the 37 in his last three games. And he had nearly half those yards, or actually over half those yards in the last three games as well. But I think that's the kind of production he could have week in and week out.
Yeah, six of his 8 touchdowns came in the last three games too. So,
oh my God, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. I thought you were lying like you always do. You were right.
Yeah, I drop truth bombs. All right, real quick, let's get to our 50s before we grab a quick break. Yeah. And let's 60s coming in at the 50s. We've got new Texas A&M wide receiver Kevin Concepcion coming over from NC State. We've got 57 defensive tackle from A&M, Tyler Onyedem. Apologies on the pronunciation, but obviously they lose all the Shamars. There's no more Shamars left. They're all off to the NFL. But this is the next big thing on A&M's line. And then number 55, Michael Taff, the leader, like the lone leader of that Texas secondary coming back, the free safety. They lost everybody from that secondary, but he's back and a big piece. Again, I'd probably have Taft. Maybe I'd put him not being a top 50 returning player in college football to me. Like that's a mistake, but the other ones I think are fair. I'm really interested to see what Concepcion, and we'll see what happens with Micah Hudson, the Texas Tech receiver that's taking a mental break. But like, man, there's no excuse for. Mike Elko said, we're going to get all the weapons we can from Marcel Reed. And if Concepcion lives up to the hype, he'll be the next big, great wide receiver at A&M.
No one else on that list, huh? No one else in that top that group of 10?
Oh, yeah, number 60, Diego Pavia, my ball. I had him listed in the 60s. Yeah, and again, that's another one where like, okay, are there 59 better players in college football than Diego Pavia? Like that one feels like he should be higher. And all that dude's going to do is take that and put it on a T-shirt and use it as a chip on his shoulder this year.
Yeah, and then go beat Hugh Freeze for the 8th time in 3 years. I do think Michael Taff is good. I think he was correctly left out, but probably just because they were frustrated with how he spells his name. Way too many extra letters there. He spells his last name like he's trying to make a word count for a college essay. Like you could take out at least one of those A's or one of those F's or both. Anyway, Kevin Concepcion, I think, will be good. I'm excited to see what that kid looks like. I've said this over and over, and I hate myself for it. I have never been a person that has bought into A&M and their hype going into a season. I just never have. That is not the same for me this year. I'm very much bought into A&M. I think they're going to be very good. It'll be interesting to see all those players they got. They have the 6th highest ranked returning production in the in the country, and the highest in the SEC. Elko, listen, people forget, like, even when they were starting their slide, now they got their doors blown off when they came to Columbia, but they get South Carolina at home this year. But even when they started their slide, they still controlled their own destiny going into the very last week of the regular season against Texas. So, yeah, I think they're going to be really good.
All right, we're going to get to the top 50 when we return here on Crossover Edition, Locked On Gamecocks, Locked On SEC. Well, first, I want to remind you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. And look, March basketball is here, and there's no better way for you to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. And with Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, keeps every game exciting, and look, pretty easy to do. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, stay engaged all game long, and when you win, your money's going to hit your account in as little as 15 minutes. There's no waiting around. And they got awesome promos going every week. They have Taco Tuesday and a bunch of different features where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Go download the app today. It's called Prize Picks, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It is Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, jumping back into it with our buddy Chris Marler. And Marler, we're into our top 50. Again, this is the College Sports Network. They put out their list of top 100 returning players in all of college football. Hasz Fawcett. He pronounces it Fawcett, right? It's not like French, like Fosse or something.
It's
but
Fawcett, yeah.
Sure. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. I took a lot of French in school. Let's get into our I don't know, pardon moi. Let's get into the top 50 here, and we start with taking a look here. We've got coming in at number 48, it is Jordan White. He is the center for Vandy. He's coming over from Liberty, so that's a guy that they're very excited about that's going to have that center to quarterback exchange with Diego Pavia. Yeah. Malik Muhammad comes in at number 46. He's the corner for Texas. Number 45, Caden Durham, the LSU running back, who was very dynamic as a freshman. Number 43 in here, a former Gamecock coming over from Charlotte. He's now at Arkansas, wide receiver Omega Blake. I think that's very high for him coming in on this list. But what do you make of some of these names?
Yeah, Omega Blake, former Gamecock commit for one. This whole list right here is where I start to see, like, okay, now I feel like you guys are just messing with us. Let me start at 44 with Jordan Seaton. I don't know how many total sacks Jordan Seaton gave up this year. Personally, I do know that Colorado defense or that Colorado offensive line gave up 43 total this year, which was in the bottom 5 of the entire country, and they gave up 99 in the past 2 years. So to have a true freshman left tackle on that unit all of a sudden be in the top 50 is wild. Cade Klubnik, earmuff it, Carolina fans, because you know I will never pull for Cade Klubnik in a single game unless he's playing Georgia or Al-Qaeda. But I will tell you this. Cade Klubnik goes into this season with he had 35 touchdowns and 4 picks last year. He was incredible. So him being at 50, at 50, that's kind of crazy to me. Like, you telling me that Cade Klubnik had a worse year than Caden Durham? It just feels very shocking to me that is that's where we are here. I do think Omega Blake is going to eat in that offense. I think he'll do very well with Bobby Petrino as the OC and all that kind of stuff. It's also interesting to see how many players Liberty has just put into Power 4 programs, especially around the SEC over the past couple of years in the portal. But I love Caden Durham. I think that kid, he had a huge game against South Carolina, third game of his career. Kind of thought he was going to be used as more of a focal point in the offense, especially with that offensive line they had, but he just wasn't. And I'm shocked to see him and those other players ahead of Cade Klubnik that much. That's very surprising. Yeah,
a little premature to me to put Durham in the top 50. Like, I would still have Diego Pavia ahead of him. And again, how do you determine, is Nico Iamaleava more important to Tennessee than Caden Durham is to LSU? You can get into those arguments, but I thought that was a little premature. All right, let's get into our next batch of the rankings, and we get into the 30s. And coming in at number 40, we've got KJ Bolden, defensive back from Georgia. At number 39, we've got Jermod McCoy, the Tennessee DB, who obviously is injured right now. He's going to miss all of spring, be back ready for the season. Number 37, the new Oklahoma quarterback, John Mateer, coming over from Washington State. Number 32, Fernando Carmona, the Arkansas left tackle. And number 32, LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. So 5 SEC guys in this group.
KJ Bolden is 10 spot. We're doing a weekly thing here, shameless plug on LouisianaSports.net, where it's talking about like the biggest breakout players for the spring. And the very first player I wrote about was KJ Bolden. I think he's going to be really good. I think it was 5th on the team in tackles his freshman season. Played in all but one game. I think he started at least 2. A really good player, like a really good player. I don't know if I put him up at 40. Maybe I think he has the potential to be a top 40 player, but that's kind of surprising. John Mateer being at 37, I don't have a take on that either way. I just think it's interesting, mainly because of the fact that that's a kid that before Carson Beck put his name in the portal, he was the number 1 overall player in the portal, and not a lot of SEC fans, I think, had heard anything about him playing his 2024 season up there in Washington State, over there in Pullman.
And he comes with his OC, Ben Arbuckle, as a package deal with Oklahoma. So that's like one of the names. When people ask me who I'm most intrigued to see this year, like that's like the biggest newcomer. I can't wait to see what he is in the SEC. Yeah,
I agree with that. 32 with Nuss is it's such an intriguing person. There's people that have talked about Garrett Nussmeier this offseason and said, and NFL scouts, that if he would have entered the draft this year, he would have been arguably in some eyes QB1. Now, I don't know if he would have been QB1 for teams that are drafting a QB that high, but he would have been QB1 in the eyes of some NFL scouts and analysts. So that's impressive. The thing with Nuss is this: he's so good, and he has as good of arm talent as anybody in the country. He can be very accurate. He's got a gunslinger mentality, but we've seen where that goes awry. That Ole Miss game, he was a hero, right? Because he had the game-winning touchdown, all that kind of stuff. But even on that final drive, I mean, brother, he was 4 of 11 on that final drive. He just hit a couple big chunk plays. He's a 12th man in pinstripes away from having an extra loss when he came to Columbia last year, which is something I will just never, ever get over with some of the calls that were made there. But I think the thing with Nussmeier too, and I know I'm long-winded on this one kid, but he had the best offensive line in the history of that program, and they lose 4 of those 5 starters up front. So where he struggled a lot last year was when he faced pressure. He saw it against A&M, saw it against South Carolina. I wonder what that looks like now, having a fully revamped offensive line that at the very least probably isn't going to be as dominant as they were a year ago.
Yeah, the word is they've worked on improving his mobility a little bit more. Not that he's going to become Michael Vick out there, but just being able to move around outside the pocket. So if they do that, again, think of the last couple LSU quarterbacks that made that monumental leap. Joe Burrow in 18 was pretty good. 19, he was a Heisman Trophy winner. Jaden Daniels, his first year at LSU, pretty good. Year 2, he was a Heisman Trophy winner. Some people are wondering, can Nussmeier make that leap? It's a leap. He's going to have to make the leap. But if he does, LSU should be a playoff team this year if he does. Let's jump into our top 30. And by the way, the one I had a little bit of a problem with KJ Bolden on this list, Dalen Everett not. I think that's a little like Dalen Everett was really good at Georgia last year and made the big plays in the SEC championship game. So a little surprised he's not on this list. All right.
He's won that game, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, the way they're fans talk about, they sure did.
Into the 20s here, and there's only 2 SEC guys on this list, and one of them is new. At number 26, it's Fluff Bothwell. And if you don't know the name yet, get to know him. He's a transfer running back from South Alabama, and he projects to be the starting running back at Mississippi State and should be a workhorse for them. And then coming in at number 21, the Alabama center, Parker Brailsford, who was a transfer from Washington last year that I think performed a little bit better than Seth McLaughlin did the year prior. Now, the funny thing here is Seth McLaughlin went to Ohio State and got better and won best center award.
Yeah, he won the Remington.
Yeah, I mean, he got better, but Alabama, it was like if you were just comparing the previous year with McLaughlin, Brailsford was kind of an upgrade.
Here's the thing, and Seth McLaughlin, I'm glad that he did better at Ohio State. I'm happy for him, and I know his family. I've said this before, and I said it somewhat in jest, but there was times where it felt like the only good thing about Seth McLaughlin was that his sister owned a corgi, and as a fellow corgi owner, I was always happy to see that. Lovely person. But the issue with Seth is that like he's a great blocker, and when he's focused, he's fantastic. But I mean, my God, like how many times did you like the first touchdown of the year for Jalen Milroe was a bad snap that went over his head against Middle Tennessee State. The only reason they were ever in 4th and 31 against Auburn was a bad snap that he rolled behind him after they had got down inside the 10-yard line. The very next play is when that happened. And then the last play of the year for them was against Michigan when he rolled the snap back to Jalen Milroe and they had to run through there. Caden Proctor is phenomenal. I was worried that he would be undersized. I thought he would be undersized. He comes in at like 6'2", 270, 271, I want to say, from Washington. And he was a part of the Joe Moore Award winners from 2023. So it was an odd kind of switching of the guard there, I guess, even though they're centers. Dude, the Fluff Bothwell thing.
You're excited about him.
I'm so excited about him, not just because his name is awesome, but he is a guy that, like true freshman, 3-star recruit out of Alabama, very, very good. I can't find any of his stats here, which I don't know why.
800 rushing yards last year, 13 rushing touchdowns.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. So, but also 7.5 average and the 13 touchdowns. I think that there's room for like Jeff Lebby is not going to run the air raid like we saw with Mike Leach necessarily, but he's going to throw the ball a lot. That's why you start seeing some of the receivers and the quarterbacks kind of flock there from the portal. That one kid that came from Florida State, but there's always room for a good back in his offense. You saw it a lot when he was the OC at Oklahoma and then also at Ole Miss. And so I think that yeah. So I think that he should be good. He's very young. I'm surprised to see him this high on the list, but he's ultra talented.
Yeah, 26th on this list. But again, the production, you can't deny what he did at South Alabama.
Is he going to have an offensive line, though, is the biggest question I feel like I have, too.
Into the top 20 we go. We got 4 SEC guys in this group. At number 17, it is DJ Lagway from Florida. At number 16, it is Arch Manning from Texas. Now, some might argue that's too low for him. At number 15, it's his teammate Anthony Hill, linebacker from Texas. And coming in at number 11, it is Lenoris Sellers from South Carolina. So this is 3 of our quarterbacks in the SEC in this group, Marler. And, you know, by the end of the year, Lagway was starting for Florida. Of course, Sellers was a starter all year at South Carolina. And Arch got a couple starts there for Quinn Ewers. But in terms of, like, hype, like, you want to, like, play some money right now, Marler? If I said, pick which quarterback's going to have the best year. It's tough, man, because Lagway, I think, is incredibly talented, but the schedule's brutal.
Right.
Texas has an easy schedule, but, you know, is Arch just going to be the superstar right off the bat? And Lenoris, like, man, as good as he was to finish the year, it feels like he's only going to get better this year. So it's a fascinating group, and I think they all 3 belong in this group.
Yeah, I'm surprised because you could, and don't forget Ahmad Hardy. He was like the top back, I think.
I forgot about Ahmad Hardy.
The portal, like who rushed for like over 1,300 yards going to Mizzou. That's a guy I think everyone just assumed was going to Ole Miss and ended up not going to Ole Miss. You could make the case. I am shocked that if you're talking about making a bet, if you would have told me that Sellers, Hill, Manning, and Lagway, that out of the 4, 0 of them would have been in the top 10 with the hype surrounded by those guys, I would have told you you're crazy. I would have told you were crazy. I think Arch Manning puts up the best numbers in the offense. You got to remember you're getting a new OC for Lenoris. I believe you got a lot of coaching turnover at Florida as well. They just hired Steve Spurrier Jr. to be an analyst and offensive quarterbacks like assistant or something like that. Here's the thing with Lenoris. The worst thing that could have happened to Lenoris is that the season ended. Because if he just kept getting better and kept getting better and kept getting better. And you talk about like through the first 6 games, he missed one because of injury and he was so up and down. And you saw the glimpses, right? You saw the glimpses of it against Alabama. You saw the glimpses against LSU. But to close out the year in those final 6 games of the regular season, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, running the ball, throwing the ball. And the most impressive thing was the accuracy. I'm so excited to see what that kid does this year.
Yeah. And look, if Nick Emanwari plays the second half of the ball game, maybe the defense gets a stop and maybe they beat Illinois. They should have beat Illinois. Yeah, it was my mistake. I totally skipped over Ahmad Hardy because he's in a Louisiana Monroe jersey. But now Mizzou, and man, what a 1,300 rushing yards last year, 13 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Super excited to see what that kid's. I mean,
Oh,
come on. Look at what Drink has done with running backs everywhere he's been.
Yeah, great minds think alike. That's exactly what I was going to say. When they had Cody Schrader, and just the difference that offense looked like when they had a running back that they could kind of be like a workhorse. So,
yeah, before, I mean, this year they had Nate Noel and Ahmad or Marcus Carroll. You go back, Larry Roundtree was. I mean, they've been running back in terms of production of guys at the college level, not guys jumping to the NFL. But how about how about it jumping into the top 10? And very interesting here, coming in at number 9, Auburn DB Raion Strader. Now, he's coming over from Miami of Ohio. I will tell you, even our own Zach Blackerby, host of Locked on Auburn, thinks this is incredibly too high for him.
Yeah.
You got Drew Aller. What's that?
You know why he thinks that?
Why?
Because it's incredibly too high for him. That's why.
We got Whit Weeks at number 7. We've got Ryan Williams, wide receiver at Alabama, number 5. We got Colin Simmons from Texas, number 4. And we got Dylan Stewart from South Carolina, number 2. The Raion Strader stuff aside, my first glance, I said this is way too high for Whit Weeks. I know he had 120 tackles last year. I know he was one of the leading tacklers in the SEC. But there were some games, and it felt, I don't know what his tackle total was in that Alabama game, Marler. All I just remember was Jalen Miller running past him every time he ran with the football. So I couldn't get that out of my head. I like Whit Weeks. I think he's a great player. He's going to be, again, one of the leading tacklers in college football again this year. I just thought that I don't know if he belongs in the top 10 here. I definitely don't think Raion Strader belongs in the top 10 here. I don't even think Drew Aller belongs in the top 10 here from Penn State, although I think he can get better. But Ryan Williams belongs here. I think Colin Simmons belongs here. He was a monster as a freshman at Texas. And Dylan Stewart absolutely belongs in this list.
Peter Woods, I would agree with. I think he's really good. I mean, like, you can't argue with the production from Weeks, but also, it's very hard. There's a reason I think Whit Weeks is so beloved, and I'm not going to get into it today as to why it is, but it's very much a Tim Tebow-esque type deal that people love to see out of players like that. I think Drew Aller has been great. I don't know what to say for him in the playoff, but people also forget last year coming into the season, he was a 27 touchdown and 2 interception guy going into 2024, and he was also really good last year. The top 5, I'm totally fine with. Jeremiah Love, I love it. I think he's great at 6. The Raion Strader thing is so bizarre to me. It almost feels like this, we have to be the smartest ones in the room. The fact that Jay Crawford, the DB that was a true freshman last year and one of the best defensive backs in the entire country as a true freshman, Parkview High School, stand up. The fact that he wasn't anywhere in the top 100 is mind-blowing to me. That's a kid that Auburn stuck on the corner and immediately created an island out there. The Ryan Williams thing, it's shocking to me that he's that good. I don't really get it.
I think he's going to turn 18 finally too. So
he just did. Colin Simmons is great. I mean, Caleb Downs is great. You could have shifted the 6 through 10 and then just moved up
the group of Sellers and Arch.
Yeah, and moved up, and I would have been totally fine with it. Jeremiah Smith is the best player in college football. I'm totally fine with that. Dylan Stewart, I love seeing him get this kind of publicity because I think talent-wise, he is a top 5 player in the entire country. The biggest question I have with Dylan Stewart, and this is something we've talked about in the offseason here at Locked On Gamecocks, is last year, I'm not saying this is why he was good at all, so don't misunderstand it. But he had the benefit of having Kyle Kennard on the other side in this bookend type deal where it's we'll meet at the quarterback. And I think he's going to be great. I think whoever's on the other side of that this year is going to be able to benefit from that, because I tell you what, if you want to put one person, you want to put your left tackle or right tackle without help from a tight end, without help from a back or help from a guard to help block Dylan Stewart, have fun. You'll do that maybe 3 times, and then you'll either be on the sidelines because of a fumble that he probably caused, a sack that has forced you into a 3rd and long or a 4th long at the punt. That kid is a absolute game wrecker, and I cannot wait to see what it looks like in year 2. Because here's the thing too, Gordy, he came in at 245, and then his picture of him going into the season, he was 270, and the physical transformation he made was huge. Now he has a full offseason and a full year as like in the workout, off-season workouts and stuff like that, like he's going to be a freak.
And I got to interview him at Radio Row in the Super Bowl, and he's like he said he knows he's got to improve on a lot and take that next step. Who does project? Is it Brian Thomas opposite him? Is it Jaylen Brown, the Mizzou transfer? Like who kind of looks like the favorite to be opposite him?
It won't. I don't think it'll be a thing by committee necessarily. I don't. Brown from Mizzou is like a kid they went and got obviously the portal, and he projects pretty high. I can't remember if he's a 3 or 4 star in. He's one of those players that's like he was either a 3-star out of high school and then a 4-star in the portal, or vice versa with how those are. There's a lot of returning talent. There's a lot of good young talent. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a guy like, Donovan Darden is a linebacker who's not going to put his hand in the dirt necessarily, but he is going to be a guy that's all over the place. So from a production standpoint, I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody like that be able to fill in some of the production they're going to miss from Kennard on the other side of him. I do think you're going to be seeing Brian Thomas Jr., Gilbert Edmonds. I think he's going. No, Jatius, was it Jatius Gear?
Yeah,
terrible. I need someone to print out the pronunciations of every player. Yeah, not even just in South Carolina, everywhere in the country. But yeah, I mean, like I don't think it'll.
Well, don't try the kid from Alabama, Okoronkwo, right?
Okoronkwo, I could do that one. I think.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Because yeah, my buddy Clint Lamb was like, he sent me like the phonetic breakdown of it. I think that kid, by the way, that's a kid that people talked about, like when he was signed to Alabama, that he would have been a 5-star here if he played in America. He just happened to play in Germany. So with actual good food that's not just sausage and sauerkraut, imagine how good that kid can be with a whole new diet.
Well, I counted. I think it's like 8 or 9 dudes that are transfers on that South Carolina defense. And look, I mean, go at it. I mean, if some of those dudes hit, this is going to be a nasty, nasty defense.
Hear me out here, Gordy. And I'm not just saying this to be a homer for Carolina. What have they missed on? Like, tell me the guys they've really missed on. Like, Kennard came from a power forward. Demetrius Knight came from Charlotte. I mean, like Debo Williams at the center came from Delaware. I mean, even Worry was one of the few players that had like a high level of production for them outside of him and the interior defensive lineman like Tonka and them. There weren't a ton of transfers. Like they have hit really, really well on their portal guys.
I would have liked some of those wide receivers to. I mean, and then we're going to see what some of these receivers do. And I mean, they have to be better with if Lenoris is going to improve as a passer. But yeah, it's going to be fun. And look, overall, I think that list of rankings was pretty good, but like I said, there's a few that I think we kind of missed. I think Dalen Everett not being in the top 100 is silly. And there's probably what's that?
Jay Crawford, the kid from Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a dozen or so kids right off the bat we could name that should be on this list. But Marler, it's been a lot of fun, man. We've gone super long, and always fun to catch up. And we'll talk some college football again real soon.
Sounds good, brother.
All right. Appreciate you guys for making us your first listen here on this crossover edition of Locked On Gamecocks, Locked On SEC. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast.